Before I start, I just want to mention that if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A section instead of the comment section, and we'll get to that at the end. So today we're going to be talking about coping with uncertainty, utilizing mindfulness and self-care during a pandemic. I don't want to lose sight of what's going on today and the uncertainty that is happening right now, but just for the sake of really self-preservation and also just sticking to the webinar topic, I'm just going to stay with the pandemic. So this is a representation of how I'm feeling. I don't know if y'all share the same sentiments, but that's kind of the reality that I'm experiencing right now. But what I think is important is acknowledging that we are currently experiencing a collective trauma. So we are currently going through this collective trauma, and to put it simply, the pandemic is too much, and it's too much too quickly. The pandemic is transforming the way we perceive the world. It has impacted our relationships. It has altered policies and governmental processes. It has altered the way our society functions. It has changed social norms. So we are constantly working to process and cope with and learn to respond to the trauma that is surrounding us and that is sitting within us. And naming that a traumatic event is occurring is an important first step, because it allows us to discover information about how we are reacting and being within the present. Some of us may feel like our brains have shut down to some capacity, or maybe we feel like we've dissociated in order to survive in this act of self-preservation. Some people may feel like they aren't able to fully process a lot of what is going on. Some people may feel hypervigilant or anxious or even depressed. And I think it's important to acknowledge too that that different communities are being affected more for various reasons, such as economic status, immigration status, race, and healthcare access. So I don't want to lose sight of that either. So uncertainty is hard. The uncertainty during this pandemic has many of us feeling worried, stressed, anxious, unsure, confused. So much is happening at the same time that it's hard to make sense of it all. And when we don't know the endpoints, it can feel even more overwhelming. And we don't naturally like unpredictability. As humans, we crave security. We want to feel safe. We want to have a sense of control over our lives and our well-being. And because of this, we can get stuck in a series of thinking that has us thinking, what ifs and worst case scenarios about what tomorrow may bring. And there's this type of catastrophic thinking pattern that becomes really common. And uncertainty can also leave us really exhausted, both mentally and physically, as even the most simple, quote unquote, tasks of everyday life now require more thought, and they cause more anxiety. For example, making decisions that were once considered maybe trivial, such as where to go to the grocery store when we go shopping, when to go, when and how to visit friends and family, if to visit them at all. These things have become anxious calculations about risks, and the risks can't be fully quantified. And in a study that took place in 1980, but has since had empirical supported evidence, rats were unable to predict impending electric shock. Rats who were unable to predict impending electric shock showed significantly greater stomach ulcerations, so they were getting stomach ulcers, as opposed to rats that received the exact same amount of electric shock, but were warned that it was about to be delivered. So both rats experienced the same physical stressor, that electric shock, but the psychological factor of unpredictability was responsible for the difference between the groups, right? So the anticipation of an uncertain threat can be worse than the thing itself. So how do we make peace with uncertainty? First step really is acceptance. Knowing the future is uncertain is quite different than accepting it, right? So this idea of radical acceptance can be really powerful. And acceptance doesn't mean we're throwing our hands up in the air or waving a white flag. Quite frankly, once we accept reality, we can say, okay, this exists, this is happening or has happened. How do I want to handle it now, right? And then we want to reevaluate our expectations. So when you form expectations, you're setting yourself up for disappointment oftentimes. And sure, you can guide your tomorrow, but you can't control the exact outcome. So, for example, if you expect the worst, you're probably going to feel negative or closed-minded, and maybe you won't be able to seize some opportunities because of that. And a lot of us try to do this. We try to expect the worst in an effort to protect ourselves. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And if you expect the best, you'll create a vision that might be hard to live up to, right? So are our expectations matching our reality right now? And when we can make our expectations more fluid, we have this freedom to live in the present moment. And that living in the present moment will also come up again when we talk about mindfulness. And then we can focus on what we can control. And you might have heard this already. This comes up a lot in talking about what's going on. But COVID has certainly thrown off our feelings of what we can control. To cope with all this uncertainty, many of us use worrying as a tool. Trying to predict the future in an attempt to avoid unpleasant surprises, for example. And worrying can make it seem like you have some control over uncertain circumstances, and you may believe that it will help you prepare for the worst. Maybe if you just agonize over a problem long enough, just think through every possibility, you'll maybe find a solution and be able to take control of the outcome. But unfortunately, that it doesn't work, right? Chronic worrying can't give you more control over uncontrollable events. In fact, it really just robs you of any enjoyment in the present. It saps your energy, again, both physically and mentally, and it keeps you up at night. So I would take a moment now to think about the difference between the things you can control versus the things you cannot control. And often this helps ground us and pushes us to break the cycle of the catastrophic thinking pattern. So also, instead of ruminating over, fear-packed headlines, which there are a lot, you can turn off the TV, you can disconnect from social media, and in the moment you have control over those decisions, right? And this brings me to doom scrolling. And I think this is particularly prevalent right now. This is when you can't stop reading upsetting news on your phone in an attempt to control the uncontrollable. But it increases stress and it worsens anxiety and it worsens depression. In some ways, doom scrolling makes sense, right? Our lives do depend on obtaining important information, and the more at risk we feel, the greater the urge to binge on that information. But it becomes this vicious cycle of anxiety, right? So replacing doom scrolling with more healthy behavior like going for a walk, listening to music, practicing gratitude. Gratitude will come up a little bit later too. These are things that can help us replace that behavior. Also, scheduling a worry break can be really helpful. I know that kind of sounds counterintuitive, but if you create a worry period, choosing a set time and place for worrying can be actually really helpful, and you can gain some sense of control. So it should be about the same time every day. So, for example, okay, I'm going to sit in the living room and worry from 5 p.m. to 5:20 p.m. It should only be about 20 minutes. Um, and it should occur early enough that it won't make you anxious right before bed. So during your worry period, you're allowed to worry about whatever's on your mind, but the rest of the day is worry-free zone. So that's an important point. So what you're doing is you're giving yourself permission to worry, and you're allotting that time, and that can be helpful in mitigating the worry that can creep in, and the worry that can creep in especially at the nighttime. And then the other thing is you can honor your values, right? So your personal values are what you consider most important in your life. They're the foundation of how you distinguish between right and wrong, and how you react to the world around you. And they also affect how you use your energy and your mind. They can serve as guides during times of conflict or confusion, give direction, and keep you on the path that feels right for you. They can help you make decisions that honor what's important for you, and they give you a sense of meaning. And that sense of meaning can be really powerful in a time like this. And also, you can practice mindfulness. And we'll talk more about this later on, and we'll actually do a guided mindfulness meditation. This is just, I'm not sure how large this graphic is, but I'll just kind of summarize it. It's just a graphic of things you can and cannot control right now during this pandemic. An example of some of the things you can control is limiting your social media. You can control your kindness and your grace, as well as your attitude, right? And then things that you cannot control: how long the pandemic will last and how others are reacting and behaving during it. And these are just some images I found that kind of bring the point home about doom scrolling and how we can get stuck in it and how harmful it can actually be. And then these are just some examples of some core values that I found online. So you may hold a core value of loyalty, of passion, honesty, efficiency, reliability, dependability, optimism, positivity, commitment. So I would just, take some time reflecting on those and think about what values you may hold and what values may lead you to create a larger sense of meaning during this time. And then I kind of do a hard switch to what I think is important to talk about and not lose sight of. And that's the fact that we're experiencing anger and grief during this time. So during the coronavirus pandemic, we can be mindful that along with our shock and kind of disbelief and yearning for the way things were, which that's the grief component, right? We are all likely to carry a fair degree of anger. This might include anger towards professors regarding e-learning challenges, anger towards people who don't follow the guidelines, or anger towards bosses who don't understand the unique pandemic challenges and how they're affecting their workers, right? And anger can be perceived sometimes as the more desirable emotion because it goes together with some sense of control. You know what you are angry at, so it feels better than the kind of free-floating worry that anxiety can create. So it's not surprising that some people, in order to manage anxiety, can sometimes seek out scapegoats or turn these negative feelings into anger. And I want to normalize this too. Like this isn't me, scolding anyone for feeling this way. It's a very real and human experience. And anger and anxiety are both reactions to threats, and in turn signal our fight or flight response that's elicited by our sympathetic nervous system. And I'll talk a little bit more about the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system in a little bit. But this also explains why anxiety can spiral into anger, right? When you're on the watch for threats, you can experience an increase in physiological arousal and tension. Sometimes it can feel good to be angry, but that feeling is often short-lived, right? And anger is an emotion that usually comes with a strong physiological sign or signs. Some of the common reactions are increased breathing rate, unconscious tension of muscles, especially in your neck and your jaw, right? So what I often recommend to my clients is utilizing tip skills. So psychology loves acronyms. This is one of them. So it stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. And y'all might be already familiar with, we'll do a breathing exercise later. The paired muscle relaxation techniques are pretty simple in that if you, for example, are going to bed and you're lying there, you tense the muscles, in each part of your body and then release that tension. And it reminds your body what it feels like to feel less tense. But I want to focus on temperature because what I think is really powerful is eliciting what's called the dive response. And the dive response takes about 15 to 30 seconds to be enacted, but now you can hear my dog barking, so I apologize for that, but my partner should take care of it in a second. But the dive response takes about 15 to 30 seconds to be elicited. And what you do in order to enact that dive response is you splash some cold water on your face, or you dunk your face in a bowl of cold water. And what it does is it brings your heart rate down. It slows down your heart rate. The blood flow to non-essential organs is reduced. The blood flow is redirected to the brain and the heart. So this can really help bring you down to homeostasis. So if you're ever really feeling an acute feeling of anxiety or distress, I do recommend trying this out if you can. And the effect stems from the signals sent by the nerves of your face. So when the nerves detect water on your face and the holding of your breath, they send a message to the vagus nerve, and that's what's connecting your brain and your body to the parasympathetic nervous system. So your parasympathetic nervous system works differently than your sympathetic nervous system, and I'll show you a graphic in a second. But that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to engage the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's just a graphic of someone diving, because I feel like when you look at that, you can kind of sense as to why it would be so acutely effective. So your relationship between your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system is that of balance, right? So when you experience this fight or flight response, this anxiety response, that's your sympathetic nervous system, right? So your parasympathetic is working to balance that out, and it's what we're trying to engage. And we try to engage this in other ways too, where we can engage it through mindfulness meditation, especially through working with the breath, which we'll talk about more in a second. And mindfulness is all about noticing and being curious and accepting of your experience. Even when it feels like everything is out of our control, we can still control what we pay attention to, right? And we can turn off our phone alerts, our email alerts, what have you, to keep the news or social media from stealing our awareness. And we can drop our ruminations and negative feelings or fantasies by attending to what's actually happening in our inner world right now, here in the present moment. So attending to what is happening within us at any given moment keeps a crappy external reality from determining our inner truth. And it allows us to cultivate calm, to cultivate open-mindedness, and non-reactivity. So this is when I invite you to join me in a guided mindfulness meditation if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, you can sit quietly, but I am going to encourage you now to begin by finding a comfortable position. If it feels right, close your eyes. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, relax your body. Take another deep breath, and as you exhale, relax your body deeper and deeper. Take another deep breath, and as you exhale, imagine relaxing your body as completely as you can. Your whole body is now completely relaxed. Take another deep breath, and as you exhale, relax your mind. Let your thoughts float away. Let your mind come into stillness and quiet. Focus in on your breathing, noticing how the air enters and exits your body, feeling your stomach rise on every exhale, on every inhale, and fall on every exhale. Again, feeling your stomach rise on every inhale and fall on every exhale. All that matters in this moment is your breath and the words you are hearing. Anytime your mind wanders, that's okay. Just return your awareness back to your breath. And as you breathe softly and slowly, you feel yourself letting go, entering into a state of deep peace and relaxation. And as your breathing continues to soften and deepen, you begin to sense the glow of a soft blue light. It's beginning to float down over the top of your head, flowing over your face, bringing deep relaxation as the soft blue light continues to flow down your neck, into your shoulders, and down your arms. Everywhere the soft blue light touches, your body experiences relaxation. The soft blue light continues now down your chest, down your back, and down your torso. Feel yourself sinking into this wave of peace and relaxation as the blue light continues down through your hips and your thighs, down through your knees, your calves, and all the way down into the soles of your feet. Your entire being is illuminated in soft blue light. and you feel every cell within you relaxing and letting go. Take this peaceful feeling with you. Become aware of your body in the room. Slowly begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. And when you feel ready, open your eyes and come back into the room. We can reflect on that experience later if people want to do that. But I'm just going to keep moving on into the self-care portion of the webinar. So self-care can be a lot of things. It can be, as this graphic shows, asking for help, spending time alone, putting yourself first, asking for what you need, setting boundaries, staying at home, saying no, forgiving yourself, taking a step back. What's the important point here is the self-care that you do needs to restore you and not take away from you, right? And sometimes we have to become aware of what is serving us, right? Sometimes people will say that going to the gym is self-care, and that might be true for some people. And for other people, that might not be true because that might not feel restorative, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Just another graphic about the types of self-care. They can be physical, emotional, social, spiritual, personal, space-oriented, financially related, or work-related. And the most important point I think to make is that self-care isn't selfish. Yes, you are doing it for you, but that doesn't make it a selfish act, right? It is about nourishing yourself in a way that is also empowering and gets you through the day. So something that's important is coping flexibility, right? So coping flexibility is the ability to discontinue an ineffective coping strategy and produce and implement an alternative coping strategy if necessary, right? So this is being mindful of your coping, perhaps of your self-care, and noticing what's helping me, what's serving me, and what isn't, right? And flexible coping has been positively associated with improved psychological health. And saying no is important, and I don't think that we emphasize this enough when we talk about self-care, because when we talk about self-care, we often talk about bubble baths and massages, and those things are important and nice, right? But we don't talk about, saying no. And when we say no to things that generally do not interest us or serve us, we take our power back, right? We need to set our intentions clearly. We need to protect our time and we need to protect our energy. And we remain aligned with ourselves and our values in doing that. We also want to reflect. So check in with yourself. Allow yourself to get in touch with how you're feeling. Reflect both on what's hard and on what's still good, right? You can also utilize a gratitude journal. Some of the people I work with do this and find it to be helpful. Every day writing in a journal things that you're grateful for. Also declutter your space, cleanse your social media, reassess the people around you, who are you keeping around you and do they serve you in the way that they should, right? And then practice good sleep hygiene. I know that this is difficult in college, but if you can maintain a consistent sleep schedule, 7 to 9 hours ideally, limit your screen time in the evening. We all know that the blue light is not good for us, right? Avoid caffeine in the afternoon if you can. Create a bedtime ritual. And we often say within like the sleep hygiene realm of things that the bed is for sex and sleep only. So if you can, try to do your work at your desk. And then finally, self-compassion. So treating yourself the way you would treat a friend going through a hard time, right? Being gentle, being supportive, and understanding is really important. And a lot of this research is done by Dr. Kristen Neff, who actually works at UT Austin. So if you're interested in learning more about that, she has a really great website that you can check out. And self-compassion also includes setting boundaries, right? Communicating your needs, validating your experiences and your emotions, showing kindness to yourself, and reminding yourself that at the end of the day, you're human, right? And that brings me to my last point, and that's building resilience. So if you're more sensitive to emotional distress and are finding it difficult to cope, it's important not to think of it as some kind of character flaw or defect. Resilience isn't this bold, all or none quality, and it isn't fixed, right? It's an ongoing process that requires effort to build and maintain over time. So unless you've faced adversity in your life before, it's unlikely you've had the need or opportunity to develop resilience, right? And if you have, drawing on past experiences can help you cope with the challenges you're facing today. So while it's often difficult to imagine anything good coming out of traumatic experiences like being within a pandemic, building resilience can help you find any positives in the difficulties being faced, right? So surviving hardships can teach you important things about yourself and the world around you. They can strengthen your resolve, deepen your empathy, and in time enable you to evolve and grow as a human being, right? So this graphic here is just talking about some resilience factors. So taking care of yourself, actively problem solving, creating meaning and purpose, fostering social support, maintaining a positive outlook. And then this last graphic too emphasizes goal setting with realistic expectations, learning from mistakes, understanding and accepting one's own strengths and growth areas, right? We don't like to use the word weakness, right? We want to view them as growth areas. And then the willingness to move through difficulties rather than avoid them. I often, with my clients, talk about this wave metaphor where if you're standing in front of the ocean and there's a wave coming at you, you have to make a decision. Are you going to allow yourself to get pretty much walloped by that wave, hit in the face with that wave? Or are you going to dive underneath it and move through it and get out the other side, right? So what decision are you going to make? And oftentimes the best decision is to move through it, right? The safest decision is to move through it and to go underneath that wave to come out the other side. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll just, say to within this time, be gentle with yourself, allow yourself some grace, allow yourself some forgiveness. And now I will stop sharing my screen and open up. These are my references if you care, but I'll stop sharing my screen and I will talk more with the Q&A. Okay. So is there going to be somewhere we can watch this webinar again to look back on? Eli, the answer to that is yes, correct?
Yeah, so it'll be on our YouTube page within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, very cool. So it will be on the YouTube page within the next few weeks. Okay. Anything else on anyone's minds or any reactions to maybe the meditation or anything like that? Hmm. Okay, so someone has wrote, I'm worried that I'm getting too comfortable not leaving the house. Hmm. And that, I think, is not an uncommon concern, right? I think that we are trying to navigate, like what is safe, right? How do we navigate our own safety, but also foster social support, right? How do we foster nurturance in that regard of our lives? So I'm wondering if anyone can relate to that worry of feeling like there's a comfortableness in being in the house, and maybe that safety in the long run is going to impact, like, perhaps, I don't know, socialization. I know some people have talked to me about how they feel like man, I don't know if I even know how to socialize anymore, right? um so I'm wondering if anyone else feels the same. I'm glad that someone said the meditation was wonderful. I appreciate that. But as far as the worrying about feeling too comfortable not leaving the house, I just want to normalize that experience. That's definitely going through a lot of people, not to minimize it, of course. Sometimes it's helpful to normalize because you don't feel so alone in it. It's definitely something that has come up in the work that I've been doing. And it's like, we're living a day by day process right now, right? Again, this whole thing is about uncertainty, and we really are just trying our best in this moment. And safety is priority. And we try to stay connected in the best ways we can, with our friends and our family in the safe way, right? And that's kind of all we can do in this moment. But the first step is being mindful. And that's what you're doing. You're being mindful of, okay, how am I feeling? I'm feeling maybe like I'm getting a little too comfortable. What does that mean for me? Right. So you're taking a good step in that regard. Anybody else? Did anything feel particularly salient to anybody? Anything that was talked about? Yeah, the relationship between grief and anger, um, oftentimes those things walk hand in hand. And I think that we forget, to acknowledge that they do that, right? We know of the grief model that includes anger, right? Denial, anger, etc. But we don't acknowledge that relationship, how it's intertwined, right? So it's important to not lose sight of that, because we are grieving this loss of normalcy, right? And that grief presents itself as anger, oftentimes. All right. Well, I know that we go until 3:30, but I don't if everyone feels okay, we can end it a little bit early if nobody has any more Q&A questions. I'll just, like I said, this will be available to watch when it's up on the channel. But I'll just check in for maybe one more minute to see if somebody has anything pressing that they'd like to ask. And if not, I'll just say that I appreciate everyone who attended, and thank you for saying thank you. I appreciate everyone who attended, and I hope that it was helpful. And I know that this is a really difficult time to be a human and a really absurd time to be a human. So like I said, just allowing yourself some grace and some forgiveness in this time is really important. Okay, I think I'm going to you're so welcome. I'm so glad that I got to do this. Like I said, thank you everyone who attended, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Do something that brings you joy, especially today. And I hope you have a safe and good rest of your evening.